Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt smaller than everyone else? Have you ever stood in front of a mirror and seen not strength, but someone merely trying to survive? We grow up in a world where be humble is often mistaken for shrink yourself. Many can no longer tell the difference between true virtue and self-doubt disguised as self-awareness, and in doing so, they lose something vital: inner strength. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed by the color of its thoughts." You are not weak. You've just been believing the wrong voice playing on repeat in your mind. And that can change the moment you realize true strength doesn't need to be loud, it only needs to be awakened. This isn't a lesson in temporary motivation. This is a reminder. You've been strong all along. 1. Confidence doesn't need a spotlight. There is a kind of confidence that doesn't seek praise, doesn't need the spotlight, and isn't proven by fame or achievement. It is a quiet, steady confidence, forged through inner discipline and the repetition of right actions, even when unseen. This kind of confidence doesn't come from showing off, but from keeping promises to yourself in moments no one else witnesses. It's when you choose to sit down and finish your work in silence, when you act by principle without display, when you walk in the dark without needing anyone to light your path because you know exactly where you're headed. The Stoic doesn't live to impress. They live to maintain integrity between thought and action. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that what matters is not what others think of you, but what you think of yourself at the end of the day. All the praise in the world means nothing if you still feel hollow inside. But as long as you can say, "Today I lived true to what I believe," then even in complete solitude, you remain firm. In a world that glorifies speed, noise, and visibility, it's easy to mistake your worth for the attention you receive. But that only traps you in the gaze of others. The Stoic builds confidence like a slow-burning flame, not flashy, but constant and enduring. They train their mind not to conquer others, but to avoid losing to themselves in the quiet moments. When you stay true to your principles amid chaos, when you press on without applause, when you choose what's right over what's easy, those are the moments you lay each brick of genuine confidence. True confidence isn't "I'm always right," but "even when I'm wrong, I'll learn and keep going." It doesn't come from feeling superior to others, but from a deep clarity about yourself. You know who you are, what you're doing, and why it matters. That clarity is what steadies you when the praise fades, when results haven't arrived, when everything feels uncertain. While others seek approval, you need only the consent of your conscience, because you know what you're building isn't an image, it's essence. That's why the Stoics taught, show up not to be seen, but to continue. No stage needed, no applause required. Just keep walking quietly, steadily. A little more each day, and the confidence you build won't be decoration, but real strength from within, untouchable by anyone. 2. Self-doubt is not your nature. It's a habit. No one is born doubting their worth. As children, we don't ask, "Am I good enough?" We speak our thoughts freely, unafraid of being wrong, unafraid of others' stares. That natural boldness is our original state, whole and unafraid. But over time, judgmental eyes, harsh words, rejection and failure begin to leave marks. We learn to be quiet, to avoid judgment, to shrink ourselves to avoid pain. And slowly, self-doubt becomes a reflex, a mental habit we mistake as a fixed part of who we are. Marcus Aurelius never called doubt a truth. He named it rightly, an illusion born of repetition and lack of reflection. When you often think, I'm not good enough, I'll fail, I'm less than others, these thoughts carve deep tracks into your nervous system, like paths walked too many times. Not because they're true, but because you never stop to ask, is this even accurate? The Stoics never told us to reject emotion, but to examine and dissect it with reason. Self-doubt isn't sacred or permanent. It's just a repeated thought that became default. And like any habit, it can be changed. The only way out of that habit is action. Rational action, when the voice in your head says, you can't. Don't shout back with forced optimism. Instead, observe it like a philosopher. Is there evidence for this? Does it come from real experience, or just fear I've never questioned? Each time you ask instead of accept, you crack the wall of doubt. Each time you move through fear and do what you believed you couldn't, you're wiring a new habit, a habit of courage, reason, and enduring confidence. The most important thing is this: you don't have to eliminate doubt before acting. The Stoic doesn't wait for total calm before making a decision. They walk with their doubt, but they don't let it lead. Reason holds the map, and you can do the same. By recognizing that self-doubt is a learned habit, you also affirm you can learn something else. A new belief, a new way to live. And it all begins with mental self-control, the one thing always within your grasp. 3. Comparison silently steals your worth. There's something no one teaches you, but you learn fast looking at others and thinking you're not enough. When you see someone succeed earlier, speak more eloquently, receive more praise, you start to ask, am I too slow? Am I falling behind? Those questions sound rational, but in truth, they quietly drain your confidence. Comparison doesn't make you better. It just makes you lose touch with your own path. You start adjusting your goals, shifting your pace, redefining success not by what truly matters, but by someone else's position, and that's when you lose your greatest gift, your uniqueness. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Don't waste what remains of your life speculating about others' thoughts or actions." It sounds simple, but in an age where every moment is posted online, it's an act of quiet rebellion. You see someone celebrate an achievement, another travel, another being praised, and you begin to believe their life is all joy, no scars. But you forget that you're seeing a moment of theirs, while judging yourself by your entire story. That's unfair, using someone else's profile picture as the standard for your whole being. The Stoic never lets the outside world define their personal worth. They turn inward, not to withdraw, but because that's the only domain they can control. They believe that virtues like courage, integrity, discipline, and kindness are the only real measure of being on the right path. You may not hold status. You may not be widely known, but if today you lived more honestly than yesterday, stayed calmer in anger, and showed persistence in hardship, you've won. And that's the only victory that truly matters. Comparison makes you forget you never started from the same place as anyone else. You carry different pasts, different wounds, different strengths and limits. Comparison misleads you, forcing you into a race you never signed up for. But when you stop looking sideways and start looking straight ahead, you'll clearly see the path beneath your feet. You'll remember why you started. You'll measure progress by real standards, your own, not someone else's. And from that place, you don't need to be faster than anyone, better than anyone. You just need to be deeper than you were yesterday. Because peace doesn't come from outpacing others. It comes from knowing you're walking your own path, one step at a time, with respect and resolve. And that is something no one, not even those you once compared yourself to, can ever take away. 4. Face fear not to defeat it, but to understand it. We're often taught to overcome fear, to conquer it, to push it aside so we can move forward. But the Stoic doesn't treat fear as an enemy to destroy. They see it as a messenger, not pleasant but worth listening to. Fear doesn't show up to break you. It shows up to signal that you're standing at the edge of something meaningful. And if you keep avoiding it, waiting for it to vanish, you'll stay stuck forever. Facing fear isn't about proving your strength. It's about asking, what is this fear revealing about me? About what I value? About what I'm not yet ready to face? Marcus Aurelius didn't deny fear. He didn't write that it must be eliminated, but said, if it's bearable, bear it. If not, don't complain. That's an invitation to pause, reflect, and understand. Fear of failure might reveal high expectations. Fear of rejection might mean you've tied your worth to others' opinions. Fear of change may show you've grown too attached to a comfort zone that no longer helps you grow. But if you don't stop to examine these fears, you'll live under their quiet control, thinking you're choosing, but merely reacting. The Stoic doesn't banish fear with blind faith. They use reason to separate what is real from what is imagined. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." That remains true today. How many times have you delayed action because you assumed you'd fail only to find it wasn't so bad once you did it? How many times has fear silenced your truth only for you to regret it in hindsight? Fears unchallenged tend to grow. It's hesitation that feeds them power. So practice stepping into fear deliberately. No need to rush, no need to conquer. Just get close enough to see its true face. Start with a small act. A phone call you've avoided, a silence you need to break, a decision you've postponed. When you act while still trembling, you send a clear message to yourself. I can endure this feeling. From that moment, fear stops being a wall and becomes part of your path to growth. Courage isn't walking through fire without feeling heat. It's stepping into the flame, understanding it, and knowing that even if you get burned a little, you'll keep going. And each time you do, you not only understand fear better, you understand yourself more deeply. Not to eliminate the feeling, but to move forward with it, with reason as your guide. 5. Failure is not a sentence, but information. Failure is not a harsh verdict declaring you're unworthy or not good enough. Nor is it the end of your journey. Failure is simply data, a form of feedback that shows something didn't work, wasn't timely, or wasn't right for you in this moment. But if you're not clear-minded enough to see it that way, you'll easily mistake a temporary result for your permanent worth. And from there, you stop trying, not because you lack the ability, but because you've mistakenly believed you don't deserve to go further. The Stoics saw failure as an essential part of cultivating virtue. Epictetus once said, "Difficulties show a person's character." Failure is an opportunity to look inward with honesty. Were you prepared enough? Did you act with consistency or impulse? Were you expecting too much from what's beyond your control, or did you overlook something that was your responsibility? These questions don't accuse, they illuminate. And once you learn something from failure, it stops being failure. It becomes part of your progress. To see failure as information, however, you must learn to separate emotion from event. A failed plan doesn't mean you are a failure. Rejection from someone doesn't mean you lack value. Making a mistake doesn't make you a mistake. Events are events. Emotion, if not filtered through reason, leads to misinterpretation. The Stoics didn't teach us to be cold or unfeeling, but to see things as they truly are, without coloring them with regret or inflating the pain. The sooner you learn from your stumbles, the more time you save in the future. But that requires a mindset of continual learning even in your most disappointing moments. Instead of punishing yourself with blame, write down 3 questions. What did I learn? What will I do differently next time? Which virtue did I show patience, honesty, or courage? Once you can answer these, failure is no longer shame to be hidden, but a specific stepping stone toward a better version of yourself. Marcus Aurelius didn't succeed because he avoided failure, but because he never let it define him. Every time he failed, he wrote in his journal not to complain, but to observe, reflect, and adjust. That is the spirit of one who lives by reason, not broken by mistakes, but made stronger by understanding them, and you can do the same. Because failure is not the end. It is simply a question waiting to be answered by a more mature version of you. 6. Self-respect begins in silence. There is a kind of self-respect that doesn't need display, applause, or an audience. It is built in silence in those moments when no one knows you chose the right thing without any reward. When the world isn't watching, isn't interested, isn't judging, that's when your true nature speaks. And in that silence, self-respect begins to form solid, unshaken by opinion or circumstance. The Stoics always taught, be trustworthy in your own eyes before seeking the trust of others. You may act well when being watched, say the right things when being heard, but that doesn't guarantee you'll keep your values when no one's around. It's easy to appear principled under the gaze of others, but ask yourself, when it's just you and your conscience, do you still keep your promises? Do you still go to bed on time? Do you still choose the hard path over the easy one? These choices made in silent, unwitnessed spaces are the true foundation of self-respect. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journals, not for others to read, but for self-examination. He, a Roman emperor, still needed quiet to converse with his own soul, to avoid losing himself amid power and praise. And if someone like him needed that silence to stay grounded, how much more do we? Silence isn't retreat, it's where you fortify your strength. It's where you speak honestly with yourself, no makeup, no excuses. Self-respect is not fed by external validation, but by inner consistency. When you do what's right simply because it's right with no recognition, no applause, no one even noticing, you lay a brick of true inner dignity. It's self-honor that requires no permission. A way of life that knows who you are and what truly matters, whether the world sees it or not. In an age where everything is shared and measured by likes and followers, keeping a part of life in silence is a brave act. And if you can live uprightly in the places no one sees, then you need prove nothing. Because self-respect doesn't come from being seen for who you are, it comes from knowing who you are. And that is something no one, not even the loudest world, can take away. 7. The mind is where everything begins, everything you feel, every decision you make, every reaction you express, it all begins in the mind. It's not just the receiver of the world, but the place that shapes how the world appears to you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed by the color of its thoughts." That means, if you can't control your thoughts, you can't control your life. The external world may affect you briefly, but it's your mind that decides how far that impact goes, how long it stays, and what it turns you into. The Stoics saw the mind as a garden. If you don't plant good seeds, weeds will grow by themselves. Negativity doesn't need your permission to invade your inner space. You just have to stop guarding it. Toxic input, judgmental voices, outdated thoughts, all will find their way in unless you set limits. And when your mind becomes chaotic, life follows. An untrained mind is like an open gate letting in both light and storms, with no ability to tell the difference. The Stoics didn't see thought control as a gift, but as daily training. They kept journals to review beliefs, analyze emotions, and ask themselves, am I thinking clearly? Am I reacting or choosing? A mind shaped by discipline and reflection becomes a powerful tool not to manipulate others, but to steady yourself amid chaos. When you master your thoughts, you act with intention. And with intention comes a life without regret because you know you're living what you truly believe. In today's world, where information pours in like a flood, guarding the mind is no longer optional, it's spiritual survival. Not everyone controls their environment, but everyone can choose what enters their inner space. You can't avoid every influence, but you can choose how you respond. And that choice begins with guarding the gate of your mind, letting only what's right enter, and keeping the rest outside. Once you master your mind, something strange happens. The world stays the same, but your view of it changes. What used to unnerve you becomes just another challenge. Criticism that once wounded you becomes a distant echo. The mind is the birthplace of every emotion, every reaction, and every freedom. If you want to master your life, begin where everything truly begins, right here, inside your head. 8. Every day is a forge for the inner life. There is no ordinary day if you see it through the eyes of someone forging their character. Every morning is a chance to strengthen your nature. Every annoyance is a test of patience. Every small choice is a brick laid in the foundation of who you're becoming. The Stoics didn't wait for big events to display strength. They trained themselves in the ordinary, the repetitive, even the mundane, because it's in repetition that true power is formed. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do what is right, do it again. Expect nothing but the right itself." That means you don't need inspiration, you don't need a reward, you just need to stay faithful to the path you've chosen. When you keep your promise to rise early despite sleeping late, when you finish a task no one is checking, when you patiently listen to someone you dislike, you are training without needing a gym. These small, unseen acts are the groundwork of real strength. Seneca, a fellow Stoic, would deliberately put himself in discomfort. He dressed plainly, ate modestly, and slept on the floor, though he lived in wealth. Not to punish himself, but to remember comfort is temporary, and when it's gone, he would still be fine. These habits weren't extreme, they were a form of mental training, so when hardship came, he wouldn't be shocked or resistant, but calm, already prepared. We don't need to start with great trials. You can begin by running in the rain, turning off your phone for an hour, or choosing the harder task over procrastination. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to remind yourself, I am someone who can be trusted. And when you repeat that daily, you build a habit of confidence, not from the outside, but from your ability to govern yourself. When you begin to see each day as a forge where your mind is tested, patience stretched, discipline examined, even the simplest task gains meaning. You don't need to turn life into punishment, but you do need to keep your spirit from rusting. Because if you don't train in peacetime, you'll panic in war. And life, as you know, brings storms without warning. But a mind forged daily doesn't need a warning because it's already ready. 9. Action, not outcome, is the true measure of worth. In a world that glorifies achievements, it's easy to believe that your worth lies in results. You're recognized when you get high scores, praised when you earn titles, respected when you have wealth or status. But the Stoics didn't think that way. They didn't judge people by what they gained, but by how they acted when no one was watching, when failure still lingered, when the outcome was still unknown. Because results are never fully in your control, but behavior always is. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Focus on your duties without concern for whether others notice." That sentence underscores a truth. Integrity doesn't depend on how you are rewarded, but on whether you do what's right. Stoics act out of principle, not for rewards. They understand that if you only show up when there's a spotlight, it's performance, not virtue. But if you still carry your responsibility in silence, you're living with depth, not surface. Like the archer Epictetus described, you can control the practice, the technique, the grip, the posture, the aim. But once the arrow leaves your hand, you can no longer determine if it will hit the target. Wind, timing, and external forces intervene. But if you've done everything in your control, then even if the arrow strays, your worth remains intact. You're not defined by the result, but by your preparation, your steadiness, and your loyalty to the process. The pressure of success makes many fixate on the destination. They rush, feel anxious, panic when things go wrong. But if you learn to love the process, to pour your effort into each step instead of just longing for the end, you'll no longer depend on outcomes to feel fulfilled. Then, every right action becomes a testament to your character, not a transaction begging for reward. And that is a freedom no one can take away, because it doesn't lie in what you achieve, but in how you live. The Stoic lives by a simple but profound rule. Do what is right, then let go. Not letting go of responsibility, but letting go of obsession with results. Not indifference, but composure. When you learn that, you no longer get swept into the cycle of gain and loss, winning and losing, better and worse. Instead, you measure your worth by how you show up each day. Present with awareness, guided by reason, and unwavering in who you are, regardless of praise or judgment. 10. You are progressing, even if no one sees. Some of life's most significant changes are not marked by medals, not shared on social media, and not followed by applause. They are moments when you quietly overcome an old fear, when you hold back an impulsive reaction, when you choose forgiveness over retaliation. These steps are silent, invisible, but they are real. And if you measure progress only by what others notice, you'll overlook the most important shifts happening within. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Fruit ripens in its own time. You cannot force it." Just the same, people grow in silence through repetition, through small acts done consistently each day. True progress doesn't arrive like a sudden awakening, but through hundreds of quiet choices made when no one is paying attention. Maybe today you just listened instead of interrupting. Maybe you got out of bed on time instead of hitting snooze. Maybe you journaled instead of scrolling endlessly. But these small acts, repeated, change how you live. The problem is, we're often impatient. We want instant results. We want to feel transformed after a few disciplined days. And when that doesn't happen, we get discouraged, doubt ourselves, and sometimes return to old habits just because there's no obvious sign of success. But Stoics are different. They don't need external confirmation. They don't wait for someone to certify their growth. They only need to know, today I lived more rightly than yesterday, and that alone is enough. Growth is sometimes like water wearing through stone. You don't see change day to day, but over the years it carves new paths. You don't need others to notice that you've become calmer, more patient, more courageous. Because what matters most is, you know. And when you know, you're no longer dependent on outside eyes to feel progress. You don't need a report card. You only need honesty with your own journey. Learn to trust that quiet progress. Write down one small victory each day, even if it's just saying no at the right time, cleaning your workspace, or staying calm during a stressful moment. These acts may not stir the surface, but they're silently shaping your inner world for the better. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize it's what no one saw that truly built who you are. 11. Strength lies not in perfection, but in continuation. We often believe that to be strong, we must never fall, never fail, always be in control, always get it right the first time. But that isn't strength, that's illusion. The Stoics understood that real strength doesn't come from perfection, but from your ability to keep going after every fall. None of us is immune to mistakes, but not all of us have the discipline to stand back up, adjust, learn, and continue. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you stumble, don't punish yourself, just get up and resume the right path." That line reminds us, you don't need a perfect past to build a worthy future. What you need is the commitment to return to the right path every time you stray. One day of giving up doesn't ruin the journey if you begin again tomorrow. One misstep doesn't make you a failure if you use it to improve instead of deny. And that act of returning, quietly and steadily, is the clearest sign of inner strength. In a world obsessed with speed and results, quietly returning to your discipline after failure may go unnoticed. But that act shows you're someone who can be trusted, not because you're always right, but because you never quit. Strength isn't in never wavering, it's in coming back. No grandstanding, no blaming, no excuses. Just a quiet, steady continuation like a river flowing forward, sometimes blocked, sometimes muddied, but always finding its way to the sea. 12. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to be the clearest version of yourself. We grow up surrounded by role models, told to be like this person, learn from that one, meet standards someone else defined. Slowly, you forget who you are, what you truly believe, what your core values are. And in the constant effort to become an acceptable version, you drift further from yourself quietly, dangerously. The Stoics never urged you to become someone else. They never asked you to chase attention. They simply asked for the courage to return to yourself honest, clear, and responsible. Marcus Aurelius once asked himself, "Why don't you live as the person you are capable of being starting now?" Not as someone better, smarter, more impressive, but as you, fully awake and whole. You don't need to search for your value outside. You just need to peel off the layers of fear, doubt, and judgment that have covered you for years to see that your core is still intact. Discipline, courage, steadiness, and innate wisdom have never left you. You've only forgotten them. You don't need to start over. You just need to return to what was once true but long abandoned. You don't need to stand out in a crowd. You just need clarity with yourself. Because when you live from your inner truth, no display, no pretending to be someone else, then every action, every decision, every step becomes quietly powerful. And that clarity, not loud but unmistakable, is the best version of you you've ever had. I used to think confidence had to come with a polished image. Fluent speech, clear success, always knowing what you're doing. But then I realized there are people who speak little, don't try to impress, yet every time they walk into a room, the energy shifts not because they stand out, but because they're grounded. And that steadiness doesn't come from praise or titles, but from something very simple. They know exactly who they are. From that, I learned that I don't need to become an impressive version of myself. I just need to be a clear one. Clear about my values, my limits, my daily choices. Sometimes, simply keeping one promise to myself is enough to make the day meaningful. I don't need to be like anyone else. Just a little more steady each day, a little more honest, a little more brave. And over time, confidence stops being something I chase and it becomes something I carry. If this message resonated with you in any way, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what's coming next. And remember, you don't need to become anyone else. You only need to be yourself clearly, calmly, and with quiet strength. See you in the next video.